We're going to call to order the February 16th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. Director Chansky, could you do roll call, please?
Erickson.
Here.
Gorham.
Here.
Calrus.
Here.
Woodward.
Here.
Yeager.
Yes.
And Duval.
Present, and vacant is not here. So, with that, as a member, care to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening?
I will.
Thank you.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we're at the approval and amendments to the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda tonight?
So move, Yeager.
Yeager, is there a second?
Second.
And Woodward, second. Any discussion? All right, move to vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. All right, we've got them approved. And then we're looking for approval of the meetings from the regular meeting held on January 19th, 2022. Is there a motion to do so?
Motion Gorham.
Gorham, motion, second.
Second.
Woodward, second. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. All right, we're at now old business, item 6A, supportive housing community, a resubmittal of a PUD concept for review. Director Chansky, could you set that up for us, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Vicki Kinney has resubmitted a request for a concept review of a proposed plan unit development for a supportive housing village with up to 45 small cottage housing units, a community center building, and a garage story building. Again, as a reminder, this development is looking to be done between Northwest 4th Street, Northwest 2nd Street, and Jackson Street and James Street. You can see in your packet you have a new application form, a new site plan, and some additional information that was also requested. Just as a reminder, you did first review this during your January 19 meeting, and you did vote to express your general support for the development while also requesting that the applicant resubmit more specific development plans, which included a more definite site plan with emphasis on addressing concerns over development density, neighborhood harmony, as well as a phasing and a detailed development schedule. The council then took up your recommendation during their regular meeting on February 7th. Excuse me. Your recommendation, a motion was made to approve your recommendation or agree with your recommendation. However, that agreement, motion did fail 4-3. The city council, how they looked at it is they felt a lot of the same concerns that you had regarding density concerns, harmony concerns, schedule, and they just felt they did not have enough information to really give their support for it. And because the motion that was made, the recommended motion that was made did say provide general support, that's really ultimately, I believe, why the motion failed at the council level, was because they did not, that general support level, they felt like they didn't have enough information to even give that. With that being said, they did express and indicate that the applicant was welcome to resubmit more information and come back. And that's what we are here tonight to do. In their packet as before, again, just a reminder of how, of what the general, what PUDs are for, what the general concept review again is. Again, here to provide an opportunity for the applicant to submit a plan to the city showing basic intent and the general nature of the entire development before incurring substantial costs. And again, this does not approval of this or support for this concept plan does not convey any development rights or privileges to the applicant. It's really just letting the applicant know where the city stands regarding the development before they move into a further development stage. Again, so in your packet, you have a new proposed design, site design from Ms. Kinney, as well as a description on the different elements of the project, kind of based off of some of the feedback that you and the council gave. Unlike the last time, Per the code, there actually is not a required public hearing. Last time was kind of more of a, she requested the public hearing to also give the public an opportunity at that time to give their general overview. So this time, Mr. Chair, there's not a noticed public hearing. However, obviously, you are more than welcome to have the applicant come up and speak to this new design and answer any questions that you have. And I'll answer any questions you have, Mr. Chair, or the commission has before you do so.
Thank you, David. Any questions of staff before we begin? Seeing none, I think let's dive into this. And I think I would welcome Ms. Kinney up if you would care to just introduce us as to what changes you think are notable that addressed our concerns from last time. If you'd state your name and your address for the
Sure.
record, and you can pull that microphone down if you'd like.
Short people. Vicki Kinney, I live in 866 Fernmont Road in Lake Shore, Minnesota. So yeah, basically I just addressed those, mostly those 4 concerns that you had. Harmony with neighbors. I know it was kind of lengthy responses, sorry, but I wanted to be really complete this time. It's my knowledge that there has not been any disharmony with the neighbors. We've had no negative feedback other than the one comment at the last meeting of preferring not to have tiny homes in that area. So we feel pretty confident about that. The new site plan, which we didn't really bring a site plan last time because we were focusing more on the public hearing and wanting to make sure we were going to get through that. And to make sure that, just to kind of present the idea, to see what you all thought about it before we move forward. So we do have our site plan. I'm hoping we did add duplexes, and we decided to take off phase 3 at this point. That could be something that could be future development. I know that was a concern for denser housing. So we thought, let's just leave that block alone, and that could be something in the future that could be done. So we just wanted to focus on the supportive housing unit right now of just phases 1 and 2. And actually phase 1 for right now, for starting.
Very good. Very good. And if you can be willing to pop up and down if we might have
Yeah.
questions during the discussion
Yeah.
and such. So
I do have questions.
Before we
Yeah, go
do
ahead.
set you down, Mr. Yeager, please.
Thank you
Yes,
very
please.
much. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Ms. Kinney.
Hi.
I have just a couple really quick questions here. In section number 4, who provided the figure, or who created the figures in your PCA, in your preliminary cost analysis of what the buildings are going to cost, what the parking lot's going to cost, the fence, and so forth? Where did those numbers come from?
Well, they came from getting bids, calling contractors and getting general bids, and then working with KLD to adjust some of those figures. So, yeah, so it was making phone calls, calling Anderson Brothers and telling them the dimensions and the parking lot sizes and whatnot.
Got it.
So,
Second real quick question is, has anybody done a maintenance projection, a capital maintenance projection on what specifically phase 1 will cost in perpetuity to just maintain?
no, we haven't done a study on that because our goals are going to be probably the residents themselves. So part of this is going to be, even though they're rental properties, it's also going to be, this is part of living here, this is part of being a neighbor. So we'll have like certain hours of maybe possibly working each week, we'll have to work all that out. Otherwise, we will have a property manager, and if we do have to hire staff, then that's something that we'll have to look into.
Got it. Okay, and just last one real quick. Your proposed budget is $2,191,400, and if I'm reading this correctly, you have 800 grand secured, which means you have a delta of 1.391, which needs to be found, cultivated, donated, or so forth. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Any other questions from Ms. Kinney?
I have a couple quick questions.
Mr. Gorham, please.
First question, I'm a little confused. Is the community center building, is that part of phase 1 or phase 2?
You know, we originally thought we would just maybe try to do a small building in phase 1, but we really would like to do the community center in phase 1 if we can afford it.
Is it going to be within the bounds of phase 1? I almost see it like
Well,
within the bounds of phase 2. I'm just
You're
trying to-
seeing a fence around phase 1 because that will be a housing unit that will be fenced in. So that's kind of where the boundary is. So the community center just across the street will still be accessible, of course, and of course that won't be fenced in because there won't be any houses on that side.
That's the purple building.
The purple building, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so probably the parking lot in the purple building, we'd like to put that in phase 1, just because of the supportive services. We just wanted to make sure we have enough room, because that's kind of the whole idea of this type of housing development.
Okay. Second question, I'm still trying to work around the concept of a fence. I'm still trying to figure this one out. How big is the fence?
We haven't completely determined that. We're thinking maybe somewhere between 4 and 5 feet. We have to do, of course, look at our budget. I'm assuming we might go maybe chain link fence, growing vines up it. If we have to, it's really going to be about the budget. So if we can raise enough money, then we'll do a nicer fence. But
Will it be a chain link fence, or will it be something a little more pleasing to the eye than a chain link fence?
well, we'd like to if we can raise funding. We'd like to
Okay.
have a beautiful fence. But otherwise,
Okay.
if we have to, we would do chain link and then do vines growing up it. But we'll have to see what our budget's going to
With
be.
the point of a 4 to 5 foot fence, that's more symbolic than anything else, a 4 or 5 foot fence, correct?
Well, I do think it's not likely that people are going to climb over it, or at least they'd probably be seen or visible. So the idea is really to provide security.
Okay.
And we'll have to look at that. We'd have to hire a security company with that, with the cameras and all that we have to do. So that's something that that's something that we want to do, but we don't have the details of the fencing or a lot of the details like that figured out yet.
Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions for the applicant? Mr. Erickson, please.
So was considerable concern from this group and then also from council about the density
Yes.
that you've heard about, and you did address that a little bit in your new application. But fourplexes was brought up, and I see that you responded to tiny homes being more advantageous versus single units, but could that be something that you could reconsider, the fourplexes? Because again, density was kind of one of the main concerns from council as well as this group. And I think kind of the tiny home concept, I think that makes sense in some places, perhaps not in this location, has come up several times. Could you address that? How would these tiny homes be more conducive than, a fourplex apartment type of situation?
Sure. The tiny homes are more conducive just because of the neighborhood feel that we're trying to create. So we're not trying to pack people in necessarily. So fourplexes, yeah, we could probably fit more people in a fourplex, but it really doesn't have that same neighborhood feel. And I also don't think that we'd have a greater cost savings building much larger buildings and much larger parking lots. So it's just not the kind of neighborhood that we're wanting to build. We don't want to make it look like an apartment building area. I mean, if these lots were sold singly, like, how they're plotted out, and if they were just sold one by one, there would be less than 20 homes in this whole area, counting phase 1, 2, and 3. So we're looking at putting 45 in, which is more than would be if these were sold separately to individuals and private parties. So we're actually doubling the density that would normally be if you sold them one by one.
Other questions for the applicant? Ms. Kinney, to the Phase 3 piece, what do you mean by leaving Phase 3 off the table for now? Is it included in the overall project design?
No.
But is it out of the purchase agreement? Help me understand what that
Sure.
means.
Yes, we'll be purchasing all of the property, including that land that would have been Phase 3. The original design that you saw last time was never intended to be a concept plan design. That was just a kind of a quick sketch that we drew at a preliminary meeting just to kind of give the idea of what it could look like. It was never meant to be a concept plan. So Phase 3, at that point, we thought, well, let's see, how many houses could we put maybe for sale? We thought that was something the city might want, so I just drew it up that way just to demonstrate what could be done with that property. But we really weren't going to develop that at this point. Our focus really is the supportive housing development, and so we're quite content with leaving that piece of property for future development. Whether this goes really, really well and we can expand, or if at that point apartment buildings, or if there's a developer that says, I'd really like to look into doing something in that property, that's something we could discuss. But so far, there's been no developers coming forward, and we can't commit to being able to raise the funds to do a project like that at this point.
And so it's your intent to have that as an outlot for purposes of this?
Yeah, it'll
this
just be woods
platting?
for now. Yeah.
Okay, and
Yeah.
would that be true also of the parcel to the south here, that's up the hill closer to
Yes, we'll be leaving
James?
those two, just because of it would be too difficult to combine them because of the terrain. So we'll just leave those vacant as well.
Those would be outlots then on the plat, and
Yep.
I don't see outlot A of Tyrol Hills on the map here.
Yeah,
What
that's-
are the,
We're purchasing that as well. It's a 1 acre lot on the river, but it's also unbuildable because of the floodplain. We would love to, but that's a side issue. We would love to be able to see some kind of bike trail and park system, and we'd like to be able to add that to whatever could get developed there, but that's a future plan, and the city may not be interested in that. But
So that remains an outlot as it currently is platted or
Yes.
it just, the ownership would change on that. Okay.
Yep.
Very good, thank you. Other questions for the applicant? All right, thank you. If you
Okay,
can be
thank you.
handy in case we have some more questions, that'd be great. Thank you, Ms. Kinney. Discussion. We had a number of issues that we wanted to have fleshed out a little bit more and brought back to the commission, so reflections on that.
Mr. Chair,
That's Mr. Yeager.
thank you. Okay, a couple things. The first is, I'd like to say that I'd love to be a part of a project like this. The nobility of this work, the need for this is there. I see that. I absolutely sense that and see that. So from that aspect, I'm good to load in. I would also like to say congratulations to the applicant for the swiftness of which they turned around the information that we requested and got it back to us in a fantastic form that's easy to read and for the most part very complete. So thank you so much for answering the questions, getting them back to us. Fantastic. I really appreciate that. I'd like to continue on to just a couple comments here. The first one is in segment number 2, you mentioned that to possibly deny our project because there could be missed opportunity for denser housing is speculative. I 100% agree with you on that standpoint. I choose to use a little bit different word than speculative. I choose to use vision. All right. So where I'm coming at from that standpoint of what to do with this property. Or what I would like to see with this property. I'm on the side of greater density, but I'm not really willing to die on the hill for greater density. We've identified that this property is, in our flu map, is a good fit for TN2. And the density that you've described here is roughly in keeping with that. It's roughly in the wheelhouse. Would I like more? Yeah, I probably would. But the point being is that as a city planner or as a planning body or a planning commission, I feel like it's incumbent upon me to make decisions for 100 years in advance. And I feel like the realization of long-term vision only happens if we as a body make short-term correct decisions to realize that vision. So I'm struggling a little bit with the vision of this property. My preference would be greater density or trees until it comes along, personally. All right, but again, I'm not willing to die on the density hill. Okay, I'm going to go to number 3, which is time frame. For me, this is where this project completely falls off the rails. Okay, I'm just going to be honest with you. As I read through segment number 3, the verbiage that I see in here is we have received favorable response. We are exploring opportunities, and we're using words like expectation and we anticipate to complete. This scares the heck out of me, all right? And where I'm coming from with this is, while I'd love to be a part of this project, what I absolutely refuse to do is raise my hand and subject the city of Brainerd or the neighbors to a project that is perpetually in a state of undone or is dependent upon people donating parts and materials to this project, their own time and so forth, to actually realize this to a finished, completed project. That is my greatest fear with projects like this, is that they get going, they get an approval, but they never realize either the momentum or the money to actually get them finished to meet the original vision of what they were set out to be. So that has me very, very nervous. When I read on further into number 4, what my concern in number 3 is compounded. We have a $2.1 million project here. 800 grand of it is roughly secured, which means that we are going to be relying on, or you are going to be relying on the community to come up with roughly $1.4 million in either gratis work, materials at discounted rates, or some version of non-compensated work to realize this project. That also scares the heck out of me. I would like to consider myself half optimist, half pessimist, although a lot of you guys might argue with that. But anyways, I like to find the middle ground on that. But what I would say is that is a very ambitious appraisal of what I think you could actually do to make this happen. I just feel like that is going to be a huge challenge. We're in the busiest building market that we've ever been in. Every electrician, plumber, HVAC guy is out there working 12 hours a day, making the most money they've ever made. And I think to ask them to come and do gratis work on a project like this, or for building companies who are already short on materials to donate materials, is going to be a monumental ask. I don't think, or at least I'm going to challenge whether that is realistic, okay? The project expenses, I work in this field. I bid houses and projects and construction residential for a living. And what I can tell you is, and I don't necessarily want to argue with the people that you called on the phone, but what I can tell you is that I believe that your preliminary, your PCA is vastly off. In my experience, your $2.1 million budget is short by at least 30%. And what I can tell you is I bid projects for a living. I ran the numbers on this by square footage, by a lot of different metrics, and came up with the same kind of outcome, in that I don't believe that your $2.1 million is accurate. It may have been a year ago, it may have even been some time ago, but we are increasing in inflation in construction projects at a rate of about 5% a month in this county. That is an enormous number, okay? And finally, I always question how a project like this is going to get maintained, not just today, not just in the next 3 years, but for 50 years to come. And when somebody comes and stands before us and really has no idea on how it's going to be maintained long-term, other than the hope that it will self-sustain and it will gain momentum, I'm just absolutely horrified of that, again, because of the perpetuity of projects sitting in a state of undone or partial completion, or just difficult to maintain. I ran some really quick numbers using your $2.1 million, assuming they could be built at that, and using the national average of around 3.5% per year is what you need to come up with to just properly maintain just a basic house. Though that comes out to $70,000 a year, $6,000 per month to just maintain what you have, not including parking lot spaces, roads, infrastructures, and lights. That's just the buildings alone. So I would also say that the parking lot, which has a 20-year lifespan, is vastly undervalued, and that guy alone is going to be a monumental replacement 20 years from now, and I'm just wondering who's going to pay for all of that. So I'm going to wrap it up because I've talked long enough, and I'm just going to say that because of those reasons, I would love to support this, and I do support this in its inception, in the idea, but I will not be supporting this, and I stand in opposition of allowing this to go on. So I thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Yeager. Other comments? Questions? Mr. Gorham, please.
I have two, not nearly as complete or dramatic as Mr. Yeager, but
Dramatic? Was it dramatic? I want a hand vote right now.
good. Okay. Oh, it's good. I hesitated to even try to follow. Okay, here's my concerns. Number one, I don't see any overruns in the budget. I don't see anything saying, if you're going to build something you think it's 100,000, you better have 120,000. You really just should. You should somehow have it, because what are you going to do? Because what, are you going to stop after you spent 90,000? You're probably not. You have to complete it. You have to finish it. My second thing is, I think as a city we have to think about what's the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario I would see is that the project goes under and we're left with a bunch of little houses that are going to be tough to sell with a fence around them. And that worries me. I would just like to know, what's our way out? I mean, how does that site continue without having a faith-based community pushing it? How do you do that? I mean, I can appreciate the power of faith to move you along through the process, but at some point, we have to imagine what's going to happen when people aren't as enthused, and we're stuck with some property in a configuration that might not be market friendly. So that's a concern. Not a deal breaker, I don't know, but those are my concerns. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Gorham. Other comments? Questions, concerns? Ms. Woodward, please.
I'll go next. I love the concept. I absolutely want to see some sort of supporting housing unit with a secure living option, a safe living option in our community for people who desperately need that. We have people who go into the women's shelter and need somewhere to transition after that, and they're frequently the victims of stalking and other forms of harassment, and something like this would be absolutely fantastic. You mentioned a chain link fence. I would be out of there. That is not something that I would have moved into 20 years ago in need of that situation. It would need to, you would talk to a security company and they would tell you, you know, a tall fence, an opaque fence, something that's going to completely block it out and make it impossible for somebody to sit farther down the street or off in the woods and watch people, or make someone's life difficult, eavesdrop, that sort of thing. So the security fencing is going to be a very large expense. And looking through, I agree with Commissioner Yeager on the expense estimates. We did $80,000 to pave my church parking lot a few months ago, and we stopped at half the parking lot because we hit that cost. And it wasn't anywhere near that amount of space, and it ran really fast. It included no edging, it included nothing else. They came in and they ran pavement until we ran out of money, and that was it. So you're not gonna get a lot for $80,000. You're probably not gonna get that many parking spaces. But I think if prices, building costs level out, if people are available, maybe the market will allow something like that to be community-driven. I agree that it needs to be probably something backed by other community organizations, so that there's a little more power and pull behind it to ensure that something like this is going to carry on and there'll be some longevity to it. I want to see it happen, but I don't see it happening right away in the market in what we have going on currently. But don't let that stop you from pushing forward. Someday. Someday.
Thank you, Ms. Woodward. Yes,
Chair.
Mr. Calros.
I love the idea, and I loved reading the questions and the answers and how you filled that out, and it really helped me really understand what it's all about. And I know I came in, or I think we all came in at the last meeting kind of wondering exactly what it was all about, and, you know, veterans in the area being close to Camp Ripley and the homelessness that, being from the cities, I wasn't aware about until I saw a woman sleeping by my church outside, and a lot of people, you know, they're jumping house to house, so you don't actively see them outside like you do in the metro. So I know the needs there, love the idea, kind of like Teresa said, the timing, it's just, you know, with Commissioner Yeager talking about, you know, inflation, the budget concerns, it's kind of the big thing where it's hard to kind of check this off and keep it moving, but, you know, I don't know, timing-wise, you know, months, years down the road, this could totally happen. I love it, the space where it's at. I don't have density issues there. And the phase 3 flexibility you have in the spot there, that's where it could be an apartment or something with higher density. I think that's awesome to be open to that. And so I don't want to deter anything, but I love the idea. I just feel like it might be the wrong timing with that extra kind of chunk there where it's kind of a question mark at this point. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Mr. Calros. Mr. Erickson.
So, really two main concerns for me with this is, one, I've already kind of mentioned the density. And while that may not be everything, I think, you know, the property's currently zoned for something more dense than this. And then secondly, as Commissioner Gorham brought up, kind of that worst case scenario, where if this were to, unfortunately, if it were to fail, you'd be looking at reselling that property. And the resale for that with a community facility, a pool, several tiny homes, it's looking at essentially reselling a resort in effect. And so why I think those two issues are related is, you know, I think a more approach to mitigate that risk would be the density. You could achieve the same number by having higher number of units, and mitigate your long-term risk in that way by then you'd be reselling a multi-unit rental or a multi-unit structure. So again, the long-term risk and then also the density, and I think they go hand in hand. So at this point, I wouldn't be comfortable supporting it.
Thank you, Mr. Erickson. I'm a bit torn. I am glad to see the applicant has reserved that outlot for potential future growth so that we're allowing the capacity to be able to address some of the density issues. And there's a lot of density that the ordinance in its current form and future form will allow. And it, to me, it will be important to capture that. This phase one spot seems like a good experiment, a spot where you could attempt a model like this and be able to, kick the tires on the concept in actual practice, putting the community center across onto that phase two block begins to interfere with, if the concept is not truly viable or durable over time, that we're losing, we're now affecting perhaps the development potential of that phase two block. So that's a bit concerning. I think, going forward, the next steps, if this were to be advanced into the development stage, there's going to be costs to be able to develop that plan, sharpen this up a bit, looking at the landscaping, looking at the infrastructure. A lot of the numbers are going to start to get a lot tighter. I think the budget probably gets another layer of scrutiny on it to see is it sufficient. But we're down a path now where it becomes a yes or no, and funds have been committed. And I think that's the fairness question here, about making a decision to allow this to go forward with some pretty important concerns and potential flaws here that might be fatal to the project's success, allowing those to stand out there. So I think there's a lot of challenges to this particular site. Similarly to everyone here, I think the concept or the need has been identified in the community. This is an interesting way to approach it. I have an interest personally in being able to see some tiny homes in the community and how we can make them fit. So it sort of satisfies that portion for me. But I think there are great challenges here. So with that, are there any other comments? Questions of staff at all before we move forward? Seeing none. Mr. Yeager?
Someone in the gallery has their hand up, sir. I don't know if you want to respond, sir.
Yes, Ms. Kinney.
Can I come up and respond?
Certainly, please.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to address I guess our understanding in building a project like this is that I don't know why you're so concerned about the finances at this point, because we don't get to start the project until we have the finances secured. So there's not going to be a project going to go on forever because we don't even get to dig the first hole until we have our funding. So if it's not 2.2 million, what if it's 3 million? I don't think so, but what if it is? Well, we don't get to start until we raise that funds. So there's really no risk for the city or anybody because the project's not going to be half done. It will be not started until we have the financing. So you really aren't taking a risk with that. As far as if something happens in this, the project here, we have these small houses, and then what do you do with it? Tiny house communities are very popular all over the country. So they're not here. It's new to Minnesota. It's new to Brainerd. But if the worst case scenario is we built this, and down the road there's the churches and the faith community loses interest or something happens, and these lots get individually sold off, it's still a very beautiful community that would probably sell very quickly because most of them do all over the country when they build a tiny house community with a clubhouse. So it's still, no matter what happens in the future, which I don't think it will, I think we have a need for this kind of a development, but there really is no risk. there's no risk in starting it because we'll raise the funds before we start. And if anything happened, there's really no risk because it's a beautiful community that would be sold individually. So just wanted to make that point.
Thank you, Ms. Kinney. So I think at this point, I'd be looking for a motion that, I think during the city council meeting, the term support was troublesome, I think, as part of the vote there. So I think if we're going to be making a recommendation, perhaps it's to advance, allow the applicant to advance to the development stage, really, and not a message of support, but just simply saying, you know, we're allowing this to move to the next step in the process. So I'd be looking for a motion that might be around that kind of language, if there's one out there. And we will need to make some sort of decision and recommendation to City Council on this. So if there are other ways of getting your, formulating a motion to address this project for City Council, I'll take what we can come up with.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Gorham?
if we don't make a motion, does the matter die? Is that? Or is it going to be resurrected by the city council? I'm just trying to figure out how it works here.
Yeah, to me, I would think that it would be important to have a recommendation for council to act on.
And a positive, either negative or positive.
I would say yes, and the recommendation may, you know, how we phrase it, if it's to recommend that it advances to the next stage and that fails, to me, that's the action you would forward to City Council. Director Chansky, do you have any insight or perspective to share with us on that particular question?
From how I read the ordinance, there isn't anything that technically says if a general concept plan, quote, fails, it cannot proceed to development stage plan. Again, this is more of, we support it, we don't, here are our concerns. It doesn't, even saying we do not support this at all ever, they could still submit for development stage plan. The idea here is, again, is to give the applicant an idea of concerns, issues that might have to be addressed before they make that investment. Because again, the development stage plan, with the amount of detail that is required, is going to be an investment. It's going to be probably north of $10,000, if not $20,000 worth of surveys and soil testings and all those things that required for development stage plan submittal. So the idea is, give the applicant an idea of, are you sure you want to go that route? That's really what the general concept plan is. You're not denying them the ability to go for development stage plan. You're just guiding them as to pretty much what is the city feeling, and kind of giving that idea of these are the things that are going to be concerns should you keep moving forward, and things that they should have to address if they do choose to move forward.
Mr. Chair, I mean,
Yes,
if I
Mr.
could, so, you know, council's gonna be looking for clear action, as you witnessed from last meeting, you know, they're looking for clear actionable items. And I don't think, if this group's not supporting it, I don't think it should be pushed on to council for a yes or no, whether they concur with us or not. If we're looking to move this forward, we would take that action and give guidance to council in the affirmative. But if it's not, if it's anything but a thumbs up from this group, I don't see it should go to council. Kind of as you were suggesting, I think that would create more confusion. So, and I guess I'm even unclear about, if this is just to give feedback and guidance, what action is even being asked of us? And like Mr. Gorham said, if no action is taken, does it stop there?
In the general steps of the concept plan, David, I think it is a action here the planning commission shall review and make a recommendation. So to me, I think we need that.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, to Commissioner Erickson's question, I think kind of what kind of I think he's trying to get what kind of recommendation is expected. And again, because this is really a support question when it comes to general concept plan, do you support this? That's kind of the recommendation, is to say support, don't support, or support, but we would like to see these things addressed at the development stage level if it's minor things. If it's, we have just general concerns with the whole thing, I think the recommendation would be not to support at this time. Again, doesn't keep the applicant from pursuing the development stage plan. Again, the idea is have the city's, the city council being the face of the city, they would be making the decision for the city whether or not they support this. And if they go to development stage plan, at that point, the applicant knows what the city stance is.
Mr. Chair, I'm prepared to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to pass on to City Council a position of non-support for the CUP as presented. PUD, sorry.
All right, is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second by Erickson. Any discussion? So again, we have a motion to forward to council the non-support of the PUD concept plan that we've seen tonight. Yes. All right, no discussion, then I'm gonna go to vote. All those in, Mr. Gorham, thank you.
I'm not quite ready to go to the vote. I just want to say from my position right here, this is heartbreaking because you've got so many good ideas and you've got such good intentions. I just don't think there's enough there. It's just not, there's too much of it is based on faith at this point, and not enough of it is based on money in the bank in reality. That's my concern. That's why I will be voting in favor of Mr. Yeager's recommendation at this point. That's all I want to say.
I would also like to add something, Mr. Chair. If I may, I think as things are, that we're making the right recommendation to City Council. However, looking 100 years into the future, looking at this plan, if we're looking at a supportive housing unit and perhaps this concept fails and the people in those homes want to buy it, if we're looking at some sort of a agreement, or I'm forgetting the word for it now, but if we're looking at some sort of a tenant agreement between the property owners on what they need to do, adding more density would bring the costs down, the shared expenses down, and it really would make it more affordable, and it would lean it into the affordable housing that we so desperately need in Brainerd too. And I love how beautiful it is. It looks like a fun place to live, but it may not be as practical for the people that we have in there. So don't let the concept die, but it needs more work around.
Any other discussion? And all those in favor of the motion on the table signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign, aye. All right, that motion carries. So with that, David, could you please inform the applicant of next steps, if any?
So your recommendation will be going to the city council for their consideration on Tuesday, February 22nd. So this is upcoming Tuesday. As Monday is President's Day per the city charter, the city council meeting will be held on Tuesday at 7:30.
All right, and James, briefly, is there anyone online currently? Okay, and I'll apologize to Eric that I had my microphone off that whole time. With that, then, we are now moving to item 6B on the agenda, overview of the draft zoning code document. So, Director Chansky, could you walk us through that, please?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair.
Well, before you do that, let's just take a brief pause here to allow the room to clear out. All right, thank you. Director Chansky, please.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. So today is kind of an exciting day. Actually had the opportunity to have a full draft of the, well, I would say 95% full draft of the zoning code in front of you. A little bit of an update I kind of gave in the email I sent out when we sent out the packet. Initially, at your last meeting, we talked about having the public hearing on the 23rd of this month. After further review, talking with Jennifer Haskamp, we decided to again, make sure that we got a thorough review of the code. We don't want to rush into adopting something that's not quite ready. What we did is, James and I, we got the first draft last week. We immediately went through it in its entirety, marked it up, had a 2-hour meeting with Jennifer on Friday afternoon to go through all of our comments, so then she could go in and incorporate those, a lot of them more minor comments, so that you as a commission aren't having to come up with those things or address those things. Those are already pre-addressed, and you can actually look at the full content and not those minor little details. Or minor little things that maybe we talked about, and it says 35 feet here, but it only says 30 feet here. We've addressed those things. So what we're going to be doing, as I said in the email, is keeping at that 23rd date. On the 23rd, so next Wednesday, we're going to be first holding an open house for the zoning code. So we'll be in the fire department training room from 4 to 6 p.m. The intent of that, we're going to have boards up. We're going to have with the draft of the zoning map, different the descriptions of the new zoning districts, and a lot of the bigger changes to the code for the public to come in, look at it, maybe have a conversation, give some of their comments during that. We've already kind of drafted a snippet that we're going to be sending to the dispatch to have that in the paper. Making sure people are aware of that event. We're going to be directly inviting a lot of our contractors or developers, our real estate agents, people that work with the zoning code, that will be probably most affected by it, so they're aware and they can come. And then immediately following that workshop at 6 p.m., we're going to that open house transition into a workshop. And the purpose of that workshop is to really give you, the commission, the opportunity to sit with myself, James, Jennifer, Mike, and go through this code in its entirety and give your comments, questions, concerns of the code. So what I wanted to do tonight is, now that you have this, is just give a quick overview, walkthrough of it at a high level to really set the foundation for your review over the next week. I know all your time is precious, so I want to make sure give you the ideas of the areas maybe you should be looking at the most in the time that you have allotted to read this over the next week. So the layout, Jennifer mentioned it throughout the last year. It's going to be it's slightly different, as in it's kind of been turned upside down, in that the front of it, Title 1, Chapter 1, is obviously the title, like it was before, but then we jump right into districts. So we're putting the districts front and center, because that's really what people care about. You have a summary sheet. Nice new on page 4, nice new, which you've kind of seen before, but it's in its full entirety of a table of summary that it's the main issues: density, lot size, frontage, lot coverage, principal building height for all the districts right in front. And then you move into the individual districts. Again, you'll see this is much smaller than our current code. One thing I do want to point out, and I'm going to be pointing out over the next month because I think that's important to note, this is the proposed code. This is our current zoning code. I would say improvement. So you'll see it seems like the district sections are short. Yes, they're like 2 pages. That's intentional because we're moving uses out of each different district. You go to a separate place for uses. These are just the district specific issues. Once you get through the districts, then you're going to get to uses. In the districts, the things I encourage you just to pay attention to. Again, look through the charts. Again, look the setbacks and stuff, things we have discussed multiple times, but just make sure that you agreed with what we had put in there, and encourage you to also look at the images. Look at the graphs and the figures that they put in there to make sure that they make sense to you. So if we have any comments about the figures, Jennifer and her team can address those, because again, we want those to be really useful for the end user to understand what is being expected of them. TN3, I'm gonna point it out, that'll be the one district I'm gonna point out specifically. Again, that's the new district, and this will be the first time you're seeing that full, description. It's the longest of them all. Again, the idea with TN3 is it's not going to be platted, it's not going to be zoned anywhere on the map to start with. This is that optional development zoning. So if someone comes in and wants to build a development, and they don't necessarily want to go through the blank slate PUD process, they want to kind of do something that the city's already said, we support this kind of a development. That's the idea of TN3. It's a mixed use development from anywhere from, garden living level lots to commercial. So look through that. One thing I do want to just reiterate on that is, while it's very detailed, the intent of TN3 is not to be necessarily binding. It's the idea of, this is what we want to see. It's not telling you exactly how to do the development. It must be this many high density, this many medium density, this many low density. It's the idea of, the general concept of TN3 is complete neighborhoods. We would like to see an arrangement of living with maybe some incorporation of some commercial in a single development. So that's what TN3 is. So definitely look at TN3 and read through that. The commercial districts, town center, Main Street, we've talked about it. I encourage you again, just look through that again, especially the figures. Make sure you feel like that makes sense to what is being described in the district. And then moving from there, we just go into the actual uses sections. I will say also parks is in here, and public, semi-public. Those are mentioned before but never really seen, so you might want to just scan those. Those are very short and easy. Then we're going to get into where I think you should really start looking at a good amount of your time is the design standards. Really looking at that's one of the big changes. Quickly, I'm going to step back 1 minute because I just realized one district, there are a couple places in this code where you really don't need to spend a lot of time. One of them is the manufactured home overlay district, and here's why I'm saying you don't need to spend a lot of time. It is verbatim from what it's in our current code. Not because we think this is the best manufactured housing language out there, but because manufactured housing is a bigger topic that I think should be addressed at some point, but is also a policy statement of what is the future of manufactured housing that really isn't covered in the scope of this project. So just letting you know, this is verbatim, essentially, what is in our current code. If there are changes you would like to make to this, this is where I would encourage you that this would be maybe a project after the code is adopted. That's a bigger project that we could look at doing that for the manufactured housing district. So you don't need to spend much time on that. Okay, then we're getting into allowed uses. So there are a few specific uses that our current code calls out again. These are from our current code, like adult uses, adult establishments. In our current code, if you remember, they're their own sections. So they just took those sections and combined those different sections and uses into one section. Mostly the same with some changes, but very few. And then we're getting into, let's see here, essential services. Home-based businesses, you'll see there's some change in that. There's a lot of red when it comes to home-based businesses.
What page are you on there, please, David?
54.
Thank you.
Home-based businesses, there's a lot of red there because there's a lot of redundancy in the home-based business section. If you haven't read it, it was kind of confusing. What's a home-based business? What's an extended home-based business? The idea here, the reason it's red, the reason it's bloody is we're making it more simple, and there's just home-based businesses. We do have some exceptions to the home-based businesses depending on how it's being used, but it's really all in one, and it just tries to make it a little simpler for both staff, the planning commission, and the general public to understand what's included in a home-based business. And then we get to some, I'm going to move to pages 58, 59, outdoor storage. That had some changes to it. One of the biggest things is recreational vehicle storage and other temporary vehicle storage. That was all just lumped into outdoor storage, but it was clear that it is different. So that was removed from general outdoor storage to its own own section on recreational vehicle storage, because it is in the code treated differently than just general storage. Transient food units, things like that they just pretty much changed the district numbers. Otherwise, it's as most recently adopted, last fall? That's last fall. Warming shelters, the same thing, as pretty much as adopted, just changing the district names. Signs, another area you don't have to look too much into. There really hasn't been any changes to it because we just did a pretty significant change to it. So otherwise, it is as was recently adopted this spring. And then same would be for, we get through signs. I'm gonna jump ahead through to towers. Again, not a lot of detail needs to be paid to towers. It's mostly as it's the same as now, not something we deal with very often. General building development and design. Okay, this is where things again start to get a little different. A lot of changes to the zoning districts. Talking about building design again, about frontage. One of the questions that we've already discussed with Jennifer and Mike is that on the 23rd, I think we are going to have a discussion on what was discussed at one of the last workshops was the front facade or fronting of a house being 50%. We're going to have a discussion about that number, whether or not after reevaluating it, is that the right number? So just something to think about on that. Outdoor lighting, again, pretty much the same as was as we most recently adopted, since we did work through that quite a bit about a year and a half ago.
And you're on what page, please, David?
Page 86.
Thank you.
So pretty much exactly what is in our ordinance because we went through some detail. Again, this is one of those areas we've had further discussion on things like lighting color. We've had discussion in the past of do we want to clean up the language to more clarify of what I think the commission's desire is when it comes to parking lot lights, about having tall in the middle, shorter on the outside. And so this is an area, again, that I think post-adoption we can go in and dig into a little more detail about what we want to see for that. On page 88, landscaping. This is an area we do suggest that you pay a little attention to. In that, you'll see it's not really redlined, and we do apologize for that. This section has been changed pretty significantly. I asked James to put on his landscape architect hat and go through it and make kind of some better industry standards to landscaping, as well as incorporate all the discussions we've had over the last number of months and years about landscaping around general properties and around parking lots, and try to make it better clear to the end user as to what we're getting at. Because one thing I know as a staff, what we get very often is we go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth with applicants when it comes to landscaping because our landscape ordinance is not clear. It's pretty confusing. So it's not redlined in here because that's on us. The version we gave to Jennifer wasn't the same redline version that they used in here. So you're just gonna have to read it. Sorry.
Or trust you.
And then fences. That was another one we had discussion at the last one. So really look again at the fences, specifically the figures. I think we're going to talk about that on the 23rd. Does it make sense? Because I know we were kind of struggling at, especially on those corner fences. How do we want to make that work? Is the figure? Do you feel like the figure especially is clear? I know right now on our current ordinances, the figures are really confusing. So we're trying to make it more clear. Parking. We've talked about parking in the past. At this point, there really aren't any changes to the changes, simple changes to the parking standards. It's pretty much as in our current ordinance. This is another area where I think is a bigger conversation. We've had conversations about going to minimums. I think it's a bigger policy conversation of what does that actually look like across the city. And so maybe that's, again, a post-adoption issue to address. The one thing about parking maybe you want to think about that would be an easier change is to consider, do you want this code to be adopted as it currently is, where we pretty much exempt everybody? Is that how you want to do it to start and then address later? Or do you want to make some of those small changes where we want to start imposing some parking restrictions on people? And then you get to page 104, starts rules and administration. You can look on this a little bit. This is more on the staff level, kind of what James and I have to deal with. But again, it's things that come before you. On page 105, there's a handy new chart. That pretty much says, here's the application, here's the whether or not it needs a public hearing, and what level of review it gets. So it's kind of a quick cheat sheet. In this area, the main things that we would encourage you to look at is the PUD section. Because we do have some changes there. Specifically, we are changing PUDs to be a rezoning process.
Where was that?
That starts on, PUDs start on page, let me get it there. Hold up, I just had it. PUD starts on page 118.
There you go.
Starts the PUD process. So again, the biggest thing is that it's a rezoning process, not our convoluted, it could be a rezoning or a conditional use permit. Because the idea of a PUD is going to be an overlay. PUDs are now overlay districts. So you still have to go through the process like we did tonight, but ultimately it results in a rezoning of a parcel to be the base zoning with a PUD overlay. So be sure to look at that. Other things to look at in the back, you start to get you have the table of uses. So look through the table of uses again. Comments, what you think of the table of uses. Again, this is where we send people. In this code, what we are proposing is that the table of uses is an appendix. Reasoning being, it's right in the back, it's easy to find. And also, should you ever want to change a use or add a use, what we're amending is this guy. We're amending the table of uses. We're not having to amend, the town center. If you want to create warming shelters and allow them in 4 districts, you're just amending the table of uses, not 4 separate districts. And then, obviously, the zoning map is in the back. One other thing, just to make sure you're aware, there are some changes in here when it comes to verbiage. Our code, you can tell if you read through it, our current code has been written by multiple different people. So it's unified things where it's instead of staff, it's the zoning administrator. What was the other one in here? Oh, the other one in here, one thing that Jennifer and Mike noticed is when you read through it, you'll see our current codes, you'll see site plan, lowercase, and then the proper noun, site plan, up capital S, capital P. And it's kind of confusing and they're used interchangeably. So what the recommendation is, we've changed it to sketch plan and site plan. Sketch plan is what you saw tonight. That's kind of a general concept plan, overlay. Here's where we kind of how we want to lay things out. The site plan, that's utilities, the plat, setbacks, what you would get in a development stage plan, that is the site plan. So just an FYI, that's why you might see, well, it says sketch plan here, site plan here, they are different. The last thing I'll point out, and I think I did point it out a little bit in the email that I sent it, is in here, there aren't definitions. Jennifer is working on finalizing those definitions. I should have them by Friday. Once I get them, I will send them out to you. So just so you're aware of that, it's more of they're going through them, just ensuring that all the definitions match as they should, and adding any definitions that's new, like sketch plan.
There's the missing inch. There's gonna be an inch of document.
So the definitions are coming. You will have those before the 23rd. So I think those are just really the high-level things that you should kind of be aware of as you read through it. Obviously, James and I will be available for any questions you have as you read through it. Well, we'll be here tomorrow and Friday. We will not be here Monday, but we'll be here Tuesday, and we'll be here Wednesday. So Wednesday, 6 o'clock at the fire department training room, we'll be going through this in detail. Our intent with Jennifer and Mike is to walk through this section by section. James and I are working on a kind of a prioritization list of things we definitely need to make sure we hit before we leave for the end of the night. But just so you know, that's kind of how our approach is going to be, is start from the front and we're going to work our way through. Otherwise, if you're interested in coming, the open house, again, that'll be at 4 o'clock until 6 o'clock, again, at the fire hall. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank
Unless you
you,
have any quick
David.
questions.
And I think,
For that
just to
walkthrough.
that point, that we probably ought to, adjourn to the open house, just in case we have a quorum there, but I'd be
That would be good. Yes, Mr. Chair.
interested in doing that. As something that would be beneficial to me and perhaps the commission as a whole would be that running list of set-aside items that we will come back at. And that, so after March or April, whenever we finally, the final adoption of this ordinance comes into effect, I think it'd be helpful for us to look at that and maybe high grade what we think we would want to take up, as a priority for the remainder of the year, or more than one item depending. So I heard a few there that I know we've had topics, discussion on and shared interest. So if we can have that as a product at the end, that'd be great. And to the extent that the consultants within their existing fee are able to provide some guidance for us to maybe think about how to attack those, that'd be helpful as well. Questions or follow-up of David? Mr. Gorham?
At the open house, will there be snacks?
Those were mentioned, so I think there may be.
All right.
Let's take care of the important stuff. Mr. Yeager?
At the open house, will there be beverages? No. Mr. Chansky.
Water?
At the last meeting, you gave us some homework to be turned in on the 28th, I think, or whenever it was. Is that a list that's going to be at this next meeting, or when do we talk through those? At the workshop? When is that? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
I'm trying to think the homework. I mean, like the table of uses.
It was our comments, right, on the uses, right? We go through that at the next meeting, or is there a list of that? Because I gave them to you, I don't have my list.
Yes, so any comments that we received, we did pass on to Mike and Jennifer.
Got
So
it.
they did receive them, and I think they did try to incorporate them into this table of uses. So that's
Okay,
why,
got it.
again, review the table of uses.
Fantastic. That's all.
It turned out to be easy.
I thought it was pretty easy.
Exactly.
I had 30 or
I was
40.
thinking, the dog got my homework at that point, because wait a minute.
So one of the things I will clarify in the table of uses again, you'll see there's P, and then there's AP. P is permitted, AP is administrative permit, which is going to be something new, what we don't really have right now that we do want to, as part of this, implement, is that there's some things that don't need planning commission and council approval, but we do want to see them. We kind of already have an administrative permit in place for things like fences, but one thing we've talked about is we want an administrative permit in things for like sheds under 200 square feet. They don't need a building permit, but it would be helpful if they still got administrative permit so we could review it, make sure the setbacks are right, because all too often we get someone who puts the shed in, maybe we get, we don't know about it, we get a complaint from a neighbor, and it turns out, yes, they put it too close to the property line or things like that, to then just help us help our residents. So that's one of the things with an administrative permit. We are looking to implement that on a greater scale in this new code. Just part of it is to ensure that things do get done right. And when we, should we get a call, we don't go, I don't know anything about that.
Call Don Gorman. Oh, sorry, Gorman. I said that last time too.
Questions of staff? All right, well, this is exciting, David, and extend our thanks to Jennifer and Michael for bringing it all together now. I mean, we've talked about the bits and pieces, and we've gone back and gnawed on a few of those pieces a little bit more, so seeing it all in, just about all of it in one place is now, it feels like the fruit of our effort and the input that we provided, the careful discussions we've had are all really, really tangible now. I can see it. So, with that, any other wisdom or comments for David? Seeing none, let's move on to new business, which we have none. Next item is public forum, which is time allocated for citizens to bring matters not on the agenda to the attention of the Planning Commission. And no one in the audience. James, do we have any one online, or did even Eric give up on us? Just Eric. Eric, just Eric, but it's Eric, and it's thank you, Eric. So, so we will open the public hearing at 7:13, and we will then close it at 7:13. And now to Community Development Director's report, David.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have two things, both kind of associated with this. First of all, the question of Jennifer Haskamp, Mike Lamb will be around for some future things. I can tell you Jennifer Haskamp will be sticking around a little longer, not necessarily on a planning and zoning side, but the EDA has contracted with Swanson Haskamp for 2022 to help the EDA with property development and marketing. So looking at our properties, now I'm pretty much going to hopefully take our adopted zoning code and turn around and try to implement it and get some development here in the city. So Jennifer and her team, I'm not saying Mike, but Jennifer and her team will be around in the city of Brainerd for at least the next 9 months, or 10 months, which is exciting. And then also the other thing has to do with this. We talked about parking. The Parking Commission has, if you may have remembered, if you mentioned it before, they issued their initial recommendations to the City Council regarding parking issues, specifically downtown, last October. The council formally considered it in December, sent it back to the commission to do some little revision work, and the commission is sending it back now with their revised recommendations to the City Council. Those will be going before the City Council on this upcoming Tuesday, the 22nd. One of the recommended requests that the commission is making is to turn the commission from an ad hoc commission, as it is currently stated, to a standing commission to kind of be the commission to address parking issues. So be aware of that. I think the idea there, if the council does take that up, is maybe there could be some collaboration or the parking ideas. Maybe we'll go to the Parking Commission first, who would make a recommendation to the Planning Commission. So just a heads up there. And I think that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, David. Questions on that? Questions for David? Yes, Mr. Gorham, please.
Do we have any, will the parking meters come back? Will they return?
Parking meters are not part of the new recommendations. Wah, wah, wah.
Oh,
Sad face.
that's all I have.
We have something even more new, we have something new and exciting though, that I think they're really gonna like.
Okay.
All right, with that then, we're at Commissioner questions and comments.
I'll go first.
All right, Mr.
I just want to say,
Thank you.
we are right at the very end of our Mississippi Trailhead Landing plan and design work. And I just want to say, if you haven't seen it, we've been working on this for quite some time, 6, 7 months at least, something like that. And we are right at the end, and it looks fantastic. I think it's going to be a great addition over there. We're down to like the minute stuff, minute details, lighting, and some really small parts and pieces. So if you get a chance to take a look at the plan, I'm sure it's around somewhere, but I'm pretty proud of the work, and People like Don have helped, and a lot of people have worked hard on this, so I think it's gonna be a great addition, and we're excited about it, so. That's all for me.
Thank you, Mr. Yeager. Anyone else?
I have a question for,
Storm, please.
Chansky, or maybe Mr. Yeager. When did the bids go out on the park?
So
I missed that part of the meeting.
WSB is working on the actual construction documents right now. I think our goal is to have bids out March, to go out for bid in March, which means then we'd be accepting bids, opening bids probably beginning April.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
All right, then with that, I am looking for a motion to adjourn to the open house on February 23rd and workshop.
So move, Jaeger.
Yeager's our second.
Second, Gorham.
Gorham, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, all opposed, same sign. We are done, people. Thank you.